So we'll start out the video with the Azure Blue 03 Mach 1. I was really excited to take it out for a nice drive. I just felt like going to the store and getting some snacks and having fun with the car, do some treasure hunting for the Hot Wheels cars. I'm usually trying really hard to make sure that I park a little farther away from where the sidewalk would be so I don't hit the original chin spoiler on this car. And luckily there was some clearance here, but not much. So I scolded myself for it and told myself to do better next time. Luckily, I haven't whacked that into anything, but I've had a few close calls like that. My brother wanted to go to a store and get something, and so we took his GT, and I enjoyed going for the ride. Then I took my silver 04 Mustang GT to In-N-Out and enjoyed a nice dinner there. And I've been daily driving this GT, and my wife takes it everywhere too, and it's always driven really nice. And I did the alignment on it a couple years ago when I fixed it from the accident. If you've watched the series, you'll know that this is what the GT looked like when I bought it. I originally bought it as a parts car and decided to fix it and daily drive it, which I love. I've put over 20,000 miles on the car now. But when it would get humid and rainy, the bushings would make some squeaking noises. It was really hard to figure out, and the paperwork showed that it had new ball joints and bushings installed in the car. So I always wondered why it did that, or maybe if it was just aftermarket bushings that were really squeaky in the rain. And so my wife and I took the car out and drove it around, and it was making those squeaky noises. We took it to dinner here at Winger's, and when we were making a turn through an intersection, the ball joint completely broke, and I thought it blew a tire. It was loud, it was crazy. It just like the whole car leaned to one side when we were going through an intersection, and this is what it sounded like driving it. Wasn't sure what happened. I pulled it across to a parking lot, and I heard the noise. I thought maybe a strut had broken or something, and as I looked in, I could see the lower control arm was digging into the wheel and shaving metal shavings, aluminum shavings from the wheel all over the place. You can see the ball joint has completely broken in half there, and so I was like, man, this is not good. So I didn't know that the wheel was being dug into by the control arm, but I was able to limp the car just across the street to this parking lot where I would hopefully be able to work on it. And I called my brother and asked him what he was doing, and he was nearby, and so he came to my rescue. And while my wife and I were waiting for him to show up, we just decided to make the best of it. We went over and got some ice cream, and then we walked across the street to a nearby auto parts store and asked if they had any ball joints in stock, and they didn't have one there, but they had one across town. And so I was debating in my mind what the best route would be for this. If I should try to change the ball joint out in the parking lot. I know people say that you really have to heat them up with a torch and beat them out and press the new ones in, and it's really a mess to try to do it, and I really didn't want to do that in the parking lot here. And so I asked another friend who had a trailer if he could come get the car, and he said it would be several hours. And so I made up a plan with my brother that we would go ahead and go to my house and get some parts and just do the repair and get the car home. I have a set of control arms at home from an 03 Cobra that had low mileage on it with really nice OEM ball joints. And so ultimately I decided that it would be best to go ahead and try to fix the car in the parking lot. It's a nice place to be. You know, you never know if the store owner is going to be upset with you out there working on the car. And, you know, later somebody did walk by to take out trash to that dumpster, and they didn't care. They just looked at us kind of funny. But I wanted to just fix the car and be able to drive it home and just get it back to my driveway. Well, it's got the gangster lean. It's not even got a flat tire. So I went home and started getting all the tools that I thought I would need, and my brother went to his house and started getting all the tools he thought he would need. I just put everything in a 5-gallon bucket. Here's the control arms I had lying around. Really nice set, and the ball joints looked great in them. And so you can see this one has the nice OEM ball joint. It's very clean, very low mile. I think it was like 80,000 mile for what it was. It was just the perfect thing to have on hand. And so my brother came with his truck. To be loaded for bear.
We got the grinder in case we gotta like just cut the whole front off the car again.
So he had said, we're loaded for bear, because we're just ready to expect anything. Of course, looks like it's going to be raining on us for this whole thing. We probably should have brought a little tarp canopy thing, but we got it under here and got to work.
Jeez.
And so we had a little bit more work to do to get the whole control arm off. We took the strut off, took the brakes off. We had to loosen the steering rack to get to the bolts to the lower control arm. And my brother was just right there with me in the rain, and it really didn't seem that bad while we were working. Pulled the springs out. I mean, it was a pretty big job. And when we took the brakes off, we noticed that the pads were pretty low, so I was like, okay, I'm gonna buy new everything for this car. The receipt showed new brake pads and new bushings when I bought the car, but look how good it looks now. Back on the road, it took us an hour and a half, so that was really cool of my brother. It was really nice of him to help me out here in the rain. What a good friend and brother. So I didn't want to drive the GT around too much because now the steering wheel alignment was off, which was too bad because I just did the alignment a couple of years ago at the auto shop myself, and I really hate scheduling alignments and stuff. But beautiful day here, and I bought a whole bunch of parts from LMR, and I got new motor mounts while I was at it because sometimes you have to drop the K-member, and so it would need a new alignment for that, so I've been putting it off. But if you look at the engine, it sits just slightly to the left, and they do that anyway, but this one was really dramatic. Like the oil cap was hard to take off because it was getting pushed into the air intake tube. And so I've been waiting to do motor mounts on this car because I didn't want to do the alignment again, and I've been just kind of putting it off. You can see I have a sole of a Nike shoe wedged up here underneath, holding the transmission more straight because the way the engine sat, I think the motor mount on the passenger side was completely destroyed, probably from the accident, and it was still intact and everything, but it just kind of leaned to one side there. And so one day I got under there with a jack and a block of wood, and I lifted the transmission on the back side there, and the engine leveled back out. And I thought, oh wow, the whole engine's just hanging to one side. And that makes sense because I would be driving on the freeway on a long trip with my wife. We'd go about an hour away and back, and the engine, when you go on decel and let off, you would hear this little bit of drivetrain noise. And what that was the engine tilting and kind of binding up on the drive shaft a little bit, not bad, but just enough that would make a little bit of noise. And so I thought, okay, it's better than nothing to lift up the engine and wedge this sole of a Nike shoe underneath the transmission on this bottom crossbar here, and that held the engine more level. And while it was up there and level, I actually reached up by the passenger side motor mount and I shot expansion foam up in there, and that filled up the whole area where the motor mount was, where the broken part was. You could pull the rubber right out of it. And so I've been definitely waiting to do motor mounts on this, but I've been getting by this way until then. I know it's really ghetto and funny. So I got the passenger side motor mount out first, and it was kind of worn and wiggly, and I've done this before with my brother, and we had to drop all the suspension, loosen the K-member, and lift the engine on his Mach 1. But on the 2-valve, you should be able to lift the engine high enough to get up there. So I did it that way. You can see that's where the motor mount goes. And I did it without having to take off the alternator and lift the suspension and everything. So here's the new motor mounts I bought. just whatever they offered at LMR. I wanted to buy Ford ones, but they didn't have them in stock, which I don't know if there'll be much of a difference, but I did transfer over the heat shields too to make sure the rubber stays good. But to get the passenger side out, it was best to get the alternator out, and I knew immediately that was going to be a problem because being that this car is low mileage and all original, I knew that the third starter bolt would still be up in there. Those are really difficult to get to. I've struggled to get those out over the years, and nobody ever puts the third one back in because it's so hard to get to. And I was under there forever. It took me a few hours. I had extensions everywhere. I had quarter-inch drive reducers from a 3/8 drive so that I could get a smaller socket to bend. And I know you think that this wouldn't be such a struggle for me since I've done this over 20 times, but not all the times had the third starter bolt up in there. A lot of the Mustangs I've owned, I've gone to take the starter off and know that the third one's not been replaced in there because it's so hard to get to. Plus, the engine was tilting to one side with the broken motor mount, so it made it so the angle was probably a little bit different than it normally would be for the socket, and I had the engine jacked up, and I was actually lowering and raising the engine to try to help. But I finally got that bolt out, even though it added so much time and stress to the project.
Ah!
Almost lost my cool there.
So anyway, trying to keep it down for the neighbors, I would have yelled a lot louder. That made me so mad getting that bolt out. So here's the starter coming out of the car. And once I got to that point, it was a little bit better.
Well, here's the old motor mount. And I had actually shot some expansion foam up in there. And it actually did a pretty good job. I think it held it together pretty good considering it was broken. But this thing is just, yeah, that actually sealed it up pretty good. But these needed to be replaced.
So I compared the motor mounts I had. I had a couple other sets too that were broken over the years just to compare and look at. The new ones looked to be pretty good, and there's the difference there again. But this was a real struggle.
I've been defeated for the night. My wife encouraged me to come inside and get some rest. But at least the engine mounts are in. They're just not completely lined up right.
I was kind of scolding myself because I thought to myself, hey, this can just take a couple hours and maybe I can get the car put back together quick. I could make it down to the races on Friday night, go watch and have a good time. And then I told myself, you fool. Why did you think this would only take a couple hours? It always takes you longer than you think, and there's always something that stops you up. So the next day, I got home and I was looking over the car and I was trying to figure out why I couldn't get the motor mounts to line up right. I got the passenger side straight and everything, but the driver's side was just totally off, and I wondered if maybe, the K-member was bent or something from the accident. And I crawled under the orange Cobra and decided to look at the motor mount on that car just to verify. And to my surprise, I noticed that if you look up here past the exhaust at the actual motor mount or engine mount, you can see that on the back bolt, there's one on the back and two on the front side, and the front side bolts weren't lining up. But if you look at the back bolt there, you'll notice there are two holes for that bolt. The bolt is in the top upper bolt hole. And so I didn't notice that there were two because it was in the dark when I was trying to get this in. And I had put the back one in first by hand, just reaching up in there and feeling around. You can see how those front holes weren't lining up. And sure enough, when I looked underneath here, I realized that I could get one of the front and one of the back in, but that's because the back bolt here was in the wrong hole. See how it's in the lower hole? It just needed to go up to the upper threaded hole there. And that was my problem. And my friend came over with his Cobra, and he helped look it over with me, and I figured it out while we were talking. Sometimes it is best just to take your time, come back at it another day, and look everything over before you keep struggling with it. So now that I had that figured out, I was actually very happy that the motor mounts lined up perfectly. That meant everything else was fine.
The only problem was I did crack the housing on that. lifting it against the firewall. So that's something to be careful on. I was really trying to pay attention to the intake manifold back here. I didn't want to break this. So as I was lifting the engine, I kept coming and checking this. And it was all right, but I wasn't looking at this. And it's zip tied, and put some RTV on there around the frame. Like, it's sealed inside anyway. I don't think it's gonna be a problem, but anyway. Now it's time for brakes.
Motor mounts in, and it's now time for the brake pads, and this should be a quick 20-minute job, right? Well, it should have been. Man, everything just fought me on this so bad. You can see the old pads were worn down pretty good. Still had some meat on them, but, you know, old rotor, it was pretty smooth actually. No grooves or anything, no lip on it, but this side took forever to get on. I spread those calipers with 3 different C-clamps and just really pushed them in, and I could not get it over the rotor. I had to tap it with a mallet to get it on. This side went on in 5 minutes. And so I don't know why the driver's side was so tight, but once I drove the car around, it got back to where it should be. It moved freely. Like, when I tapped it on, it was like taking material off the pads just to get it onto the rotor, and the rotor was frozen up. But once I drove the car, it was fine. And so, man, finally got that all back together. It was quite a mess.
So there's the old mount that broke. Bottom side of it. Ball joint. There's the stock one. That's what a good stock one looks like. And of course the motor mount. It was working. Kind of. Now the engine's straight. So now you can see the engine sits pretty level. Put your finger around the cap. That was being pushed into there.
A couple of things I'd noticed about that broken motor mount that were kind of clues along the way were I couldn't get to the O2 sensor to change it out as easily because the engine was tilted one side, and the exhaust tips were kind of off center in the bumper, but now everything's straight the way it should be. So I decided to go ahead and bleed the brakes and make sure that everything was good. I'm relieved to see that this rotor spins freely. Everything's working out nicely there. Some of the brake fluid came out a little dirty, and then it cleared out, so that was nice to get some new fluid in there as well. And I also bled the master cylinder so that would get some air out of there. That's where most of the air came out, actually. So car's in good shape now, just have to wait for an alignment, and I really hate doing that, but I had to schedule that, and they were like a week out, so I didn't want to drive the car as much with the steering wheel off and chew up the tires. So doing all that was interesting. It was a different way than I've done it before. I lifted the engine from the bottom. I even put a block of wood on the oil pan bolts on the front and lifted slightly there. Some people lift on the harmonic balancer. I didn't really want to do that. But anyway, I was able to lift the engine high enough. I also loosened the transmission mounts on the back and got the engine up high enough that I could get those motor mounts in and out without having to drop the K-member. I probably could have lowered the K-member a little bit and gotten a little more room out of it, but that's the way I chose to do it this time, and maybe it was more of a struggle that way, but with the 2-valve it worked out that way, and the only thing I broke was that top EGR little piece, and it still works fine. I've been driving the car after the alignment, you'll see here in a minute, but no check engine light, nothing from that, so no problems. Engine's smoother, runs smoother, like starts up without shaking as much. Everything does pretty well. Now, the reason why I say doing it on the 2-valve this way was okay is because on the 4-valve Mustangs, like the Mach 1 and the Cobras, the valve covers are so much bigger that if you lift the engine, it'll hit the brake booster, and so there's not as much room. So that's the reason why I tried doing it this way and not dropping the K-member, and thought I could get away with it that way. Also, an observation I noticed was with the new motor mounts, there isn't any vibration while I have my foot on the brake at a red light, with the torque converter slightly loaded as normal. So that's all nice, and that all is a lot smoother. So let's take the Bullitt out and drive it around a little bit. So I took the Bullitt to a car meet. There's my friend Zach with his 35th anniversary GT. There's the Bullitt, nice Volkswagen Bug, GTO, V6 Mustang. We'll take a look at that car. It has Mach 1 wheels and a Mach 1 hood on it. So the owner of this V6 was very friendly. You can see the Mach 1 trim bezels around the dash here. It's a 01, so it wouldn't have had that as an option. And you can see it has the Mach 1 hood here that he had put a scoop on to cover up the hole. Said that his grandpa had a twin turbo Mach 1 that was wrecked, and so he just took the pieces off it. Here's the wheels and everything. And I think the front fenders came off of it too. So it's dark shadow gray, but kind of a mineral gray for the rest of the car. Bullitt looking good at the car show. It was really fun. They gave us free milkshakes for bringing the cars, and then Zach and I took our GTs over to the Cove, which is the old meetup spot where my friends and I have met up over the years. We had a great time here, had fun talking about the GT and the Bullitt. Noticed how, the 35th anniversary is like the Bullitt. It has special seats. It has a special gauge cluster bezel. It has special pieces. The Bullitt has special seats, but special gauge cluster. Side skirts on both cars are unique, and the Bullitt has the C-pillars and glass and stuff that are different, but kind of cool to see all the differences between these two specialty limited edition Mustangs, and just enjoy the cars together and have a good time hanging out and talking. And it's just a great time to get the cars together, and we had a wonderful time. So it's really fun to have the Bullitt around. I used to daily drive this car, believe it or not, with how rowdy it is. So it's fun to just take it and have it and enjoy it, and go different places with it, and just do whatever the day takes you to, and have the enjoyment of owning the car. I don't drive it as much as I used to, and so it's fun to take it out, and the variety is always fun. I'll drive the Mach 1s, I'll drive the Cobras, I'll drive the GT, and then I'll take the Bullitt out, and it's always fun to switch it up a little bit and enjoy seeing the cars here in this part of town, which is very special to me for reasons I've said before. When I used to work with my friend over this way and do mobile detailing, we'd come here and eat a lot. So Zach headed home, and I caught him going down the freeway there, looking good. 35th anniversary GT, the beautiful Southern Utah background. I took the Bullitt and went to a couple of places, and I wanted to go get something for my wife to eat that she really wanted. And so while that was being made, I went in and did some treasure hunting with my son, looking for Hot Wheels and stuff. So the next day I took the Bullitt to a meeting at the church. Since I'm not daily driving the Silver GT, I just took the Bullitt a lot of places and parked it here in the back. And that true blue looks so good in the sun. I love that true blue. And, you know, the thought of repainting it makes me sad because I don't really want to get rid of that original color. That's the color that Ford put on this car. And yeah, it'll probably match if you get it repainted, but that's the original blue. You know, that's my car. Driving to work really early, 50 degrees outside. I decided to see what the temperatures of the car are. 100 degree air intake temp, just cruising down the freeway, looking pretty good. 170 degrees for the coolant temperature. So I just wanted to get some data. Put new speed bumps here at work in the parking lot. I'm going to see if I can clear them. Superchargers, they're pretty hot, you know, and so here just getting off the freeway, it's already up to 140 degrees sitting and idling just for a few seconds. Then when you get moving, it cools down again. So I was just interested to see how cool the car runs in really cold air, but I guess it's sucking in hot engine bay air anyway, so only when you're moving does it get the cooler air and keep it cool. But, you know, I cleaned out both the GT and the Bullitt. I washed both of them and vacuumed both of them out and got them cleaned up. The Bullitt usually sits under the carport on the side of the house now. It used to be in the other garage when I had access to it. And so I'm trying to take the best of care as I can of it. Try not to keep it out in the sun because it fades. But I was just using the Bullitt a lot for daily driver use while the GT was sitting here waiting for an alignment. And, you know, driving the Bullitt every day was going to get a little dirty and stuff. And, you know, the rain will come and go. And it's just part of daily driving the car. So, you know, GT looking good. Look how beautiful this silver metallic paint is. I've always been impressed by this. Very good looking paint on this car. And, of course, the Bullitt looks really beautiful with the true blue when it does get in the sun. Usually it looks kind of like a black car, but when the sun hits it just right, it's beautiful. There's that beautiful true blue on there. And so I took the Bullitt around and drove it a few places. Went to the park, went to my brother's house, and hung out there. So it was just kind of fun having the Bullitt out and about. Usually it's tucked away under the carport, but you know, I've been using it a lot, and it's gonna get, you know, rained on and stuff, but it's like the one time I do use it, it rains. We'll see that in a minute here, but here's the cars just hanging out. At least this time of year it gets a lot of shade in the driveway, so I enjoy that a lot about the cars being parked here. The house sits in the right direction. So there's the yellow GT, and it's usually under here with a cover on it too. Wind's been blowing, the covers are off of it, so I'm going to take the GT out and drive it around a little bit here. So let's get the GT out. So I thought, you know, might as well daily drive the yellow GT a little bit since I'm waiting for the silver GT's alignment, and you know, that's a perfectly good car to daily drive too. A little bit easier to drive than the Bullitt, a little bit better fuel economy, you know, a little less rowdy for the neighbors early in the morning. So I went ahead and just left the Bullitt here in the driveway for a little bit, and I daily drove the yellow GT, and it's doing fantastic. So kind of fun to have these 3 GTs parked out here in the driveway. They look really good here, and you know, the Cobras are in the garage, and the Mach 1 and the other Mach 1's at the other garage. And it's just fun to say, you know, I enjoy my cars, but here's my GTs. These are my buddies. You know, I love all of these cars for their different reasons. They're great cars to drive around. One's a monster, one's a good daily, the other one's just fun to have once in a while. Ran some errands with the yellow GT after work, and somebody did notice that I have Mach 1 wheels on one side and Bullitt wheels on the other side, and I was waiting to see if anybody picked up on that, and that's just because I have tires that need to be worn out for different reasons. Hanging out at work, looking out the window from the break room, seeing the GT, cool there. Now the silver GT finally gets its alignment, and I don't like when other people drive my car, but here it goes. Now, it's not so bad because it's an automatic stock GT, but when my Bullitt was here, they stalled it like 6 times trying to get it on the lift. And so I would have preferred to drive my Bullitt up onto that lift and do it, but, you know, they always want to take the car and they don't let you do that, and that's why I like doing my own alignments or working on my own cars. This is just something I can't do myself. I don't have the equipment, and I did it at the college the last time, but my friend has moved positions, and I can't really ask him to do that anymore. Every time I drop my cars off to have them worked on, I'll watch for a little bit, but if it's going to be a while, I'll walk somewhere to get something to eat, and it always humbles me in how far it is to walk somewhere when the car gets you there so quickly. And so I got an ice cream, and I walked back just in time for them to finish up with the car. But yeah, walking takes so much longer. I'm so grateful for these cars, and you know, this car was going to be thrown away, and look at all the use it gives me. You know, it takes me everywhere. I'm very humbled for that. On my walk there, I had a car honk at me and people laughing, you know, because I'm walking and stuff, and you know, it's just so nice to have a car to take you places. Now, when they did the Bullitt, I stood there and watched everything, and I talked to the guy as he was working on it, and I thought about doing that this time and seeing what they had to say and have them notice that the front end of the car has been replaced, and have them say, "Do you know this car's been wrecked?" And I would tease and just play along and say, "Really? I had no idea, you know? Wow, I can't believe it. I just spent a lot of money on this low mileage GT, and I can't believe it's been wrecked," and see if I could play it off a little bit. But they were really good, and you know, they did say they noticed it, and I said, you know, it's just a nice daily driver, and you know, I enjoy it. And he was like, "Yeah, that's cool." He said that's a really nice car for being a little daily driver you put back together yourself. So I enjoyed driving it around, and I went and got the hearing aids replaced for my mother-in-law, ran some errands, and then I went and got something to eat, and just enjoyed having the car with a straight steering wheel and the alignment done. That is a relief. I'm very happy. There was even an accident over here. I'm glad I wasn't part of that, you know, so very lucky. And so dropped off the hearing aids here at the assisted living home and walked back out to the GT, looking so good. Went for a walk with my wife in the neighborhood after, and walked back to the house, and I just can't help but enjoy how good these Mustangs look here in the driveway. It's fun to have my toys out here where I can see them. Like I said, these two GTs are usually stuffed under that carport, so I don't see them very much. But nice to have the GT back, and you know, the Bullitt looking good. I went and hung out outside, listened to music, and just enjoyed cleaning up the garage a little bit after that project. I had tools everywhere. I still have tools to put away and stuff. But Bullitt looking really, really good. Then my nephew called me and said, "Hey, my alternator's dead." So I told him, "Don't worry, I'll be right there." He already got to work on it, got the old one most of the way off. And I actually grabbed the wrong one. I had both of them on my toolbox, and I grabbed the wrong one. So my brother came with his blue truck there, and he brought the other one. He got it off my toolbox for me, and then we got everything back together. So we got a jump box because the battery was dead, but I have something interesting to talk about with this real quick. So my friend has this beautiful 96 Tangerine Orange Mustang GT. I really love this car. He's 96 underscore tangerine underscore GT on Instagram. He is approaching 500,000 miles, and we talk once in a while, and he had said that his GT was having an issue where the alternator wasn't charging, and it wasn't a bad alternator. He said it took him a while to figure it out, and they went over everything, but in the gauge cluster, there's a battery light, and he said that the bulb was burned out, and that was actually preventing the alternator from knowing that it was supposed to be charging. For some reason, it had to do with the bulb in the cluster. So we might try that out on my nephew's 98 GT if it keeps having issues, and we'll see if that's what's causing it. And maybe it's just something that's going to be happening with a lot of SN95s as the years go on and they get older and have those issues. But here's the GTs all parked out in the driveway again. Bullitt looking beautiful. Thought I'd come out here and film a little bit in the shade. The cars look great in the shade out here, and it's just fun to have them all here. You can see the Mach 1 wheels on that side and the Bullitt wheels on that side of the zinc yellow GT. So looking good out here. And so that's where we'll leave off the video from now. Took the GT to soccer practice. Everything's going well. So that's the update for now. I hope you enjoy watching these videos. I enjoy making them, and it's fun to go back and watch them myself. So thanks for watching, and stay tuned for more Mustang content.